Hello and welcome to Red Flags to Watch Before Signing the Contract panel. I'm Brady and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. And I'm here with four amazing panelists, Adria Bailton, AJ Super, Geoff Habiger, and Solar Hoàng. Hi everyone. So first I will give each panelist a moment to introduce themselves, starting with Adria.
Hi, I'm Adria Bailton. I am a short story writer primarily. I did have a debut novel that ended up not getting released earlier this year. I write in science fiction and fantasy. And like I said, I write short through long.
Thank you, AJ.
Hi, I'm AJ Super. I my pronouns are she, they, and I am a primarily a long form author, though I do have a flash fiction in a fundraiser kind of anthology coming out in the spring. I am a small press, I'm mainly a small press author, and I have negotiated 3 contracts without representation.
All right. Geoff?
Hi, my name is Geoff Habiger. I am the publisher and editor and everything else for Artemisia Publishing. We're a small independent publisher located in New Mexico. We publish a variety of adult and middle grade YA speculative fiction titles across a wide range of genres.
Thank you. Solar?
Hi everyone, my name is Solar Hoàng. I am a Vietnamese fantasy and science fiction author. I have published my short stories and other kind of form of in writing like essays and poem in different magazines, but my long form novel River Runs Red is forthcoming in 2027 with Harbour Voyager. I think coming to this panel, I think my specialty is with agent contracts. I have seen many of them and I have helped a lot of other author friends looked through theirs. So I'm very excited to be in this panel.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So now let's start with the first question. What are the common scams you can encounter in a contract? Starting with Solar?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm mostly going to speak on the agent author kind of contract. And I think the biggest scam in publishing is charging the author upfront. So in a agent contract, there is definitely no readings fee or marketing fees. A legitimate agent should never charge you to read or edit or like market your book before it actually sells. They and they should only get paid when you get paid. So they should not ask for money beforehand or they should not be charged beforehand. And oftentimes now, especially scouting the internet, I also see a lot of, for example, like contracts that maybe require you to pay a specific in-house editing or formatting service. This should also not happen. This should not be charged towards you as an author.
All right. Geoff?
So common scams that I've seen in contracts, they run the range of asking an author to pay for something that you shouldn't have to pay for. They can include asking you to give up certain rights for things, or generally just trying to get you to give up your rights to certain aspects of your manuscript, your story, everything else. There might be things related to timing of events, things of when deadlines are supposed to be done, when you are supposed to do things, when the publisher is supposed to do things. Those aren't generally scams, but they might be ways that a not so above board publisher might be trying to work you into a corner to try and make sure that the deal is fairer to them than to you. So,
all right. AJ?
So Jeff had some very specific like examples from a publisher standpoint, and Salar, you also had some really great advice. Even in a author-publisher contract, which is where I speak from, you shouldn't be paying anything if you are with a small press that's on the traditional side. If it's a vanity press, that's a whole other story, and we're not getting into that today, I do believe. So, like money flows to the author in any contract. The other thing is my big thing about common scams when I enter a contract is more of a vibe check than anything. I've dealt with contracts where the publisher is like, "Oh, this is this is an author's contract," or "We're family and we don't need a detailed contract." And my first time out, that was something that I did not know. And I didn't have the resources at the time to get that corrected. So I unfortunately did sign some contracts that are not the greatest working partnerships. However, there's verbal understandings and emails switched back and forth that might be helpful if legal options ever came up, which I highly doubt. But you really want to make sure that your publisher is willing to negotiate with you, that they want to talk to you about the contract and help you understand a legally binding piece of paper that you have to sign. Um, if they want, if they don't want to negotiate, if they frame their contract as like the golden child of all contracts, they may want things like excessive rights, or they may have some payment scheme built in, or just they don't protect the author or even the publisher. Um, Good contracts don't need to be talked up. They don't need to be, "Oh, hey, we're family and we don't need that." A truly good contract makes for a good working partnership, and a legit publisher won't won't say things like that. They will allow you to negotiate. They will allow you to have those legal protections.
All right. And Adria.
So I think that I'll come from this from the short fiction because it sounds like that might be where everyone has discussed other aspects. But in general, it's really not so different. As AJ said, money flows to the author. So I'll skip submission stuff. And in fact, there is a panel on short fiction and poetry submissions. So check that out for like more detail. But in a contract with short fiction, again, there shouldn't be additional fees. And in general, it shouldn't have fees for submission, but that depends on other things. And again, the other panel discusses that in more detail. But generally, I would say what we encounter most would be rights grabs, like AJ said, where they want excessive rights. There was actually recently a lot of discussion in the science fiction and fantasy short fiction communities about a recent purchase of some major magazines by a large corporation that rewrote the contracts in a way that asked for like all the rights in a way that was not really tenable for most authors trying to make a living doing short fiction sales. So that's something to always watch for, exactly what rights are being asked for, because in general, if it's print, it should just be print rights in a single location, North American or something to that effect, or language. When it's going out on the internet, which a lot of short fiction does get published on the internet, the rights will look different. But also there shouldn't be like merchandise rights, stuff like that, that you need to make sure that it's all staying relatively in control. So I would say that's the biggest thing that feels scammy in terms of like short fiction contracts. The other thing is that sometimes there will be solicitations for work, but in general, like in short fiction, valid publishers have so many submissions that they don't generally need to reach out unless it's some sort of like a big name. So obviously, I'm not speaking to people who have hundreds of publications and are well known. I'm talking to, those of us in the beginning or, early stages of our careers. So that would be like the other sort of scam, because it'd be like reaching out and then asking you to pay money to publish. So again, always the money flows to the author and a rights, watching where the rights are. So that would be, I think, the two major things that are most common.
All right. Next question. What do you need to look for in a contract with either an agent, a publisher, or an editor? AJ?
So nowadays, one of the absolute main things that I look for in a contract is a good generative AI clause that not only protects the author, but the publisher as well. You need to make sure that your publisher can't feed your work through a slot machine, and that you aren't allowed to do that as well. The other thing that I also look for is, where the rights are going, who owns audio, movie, world, and translation rights, the length of the contract, deadlines, and royalty and advance schedules. Those are all really important to look at in a contract. And that's just kind of overview. You really want to look at everything in the contract, like every single line.
All right. Geoff?
So I think one of the things you need to look for in certainly with a publisher, those are the ones I know best, just because I'm a publisher, is what rights do you retain, right? What rights is the publisher going to have? Those are the important ones. Are you going to be able to still retain rights for audio or for other sorts of versions of the manuscript of the story, that sort of information. You should also be looking at royalty amounts, advances, so what are you going to get paid? How often are you going to get paid? Those are the nitty gritty details. But you also want to look for, information about like rights of refusal. What kind of things do you have to meet, or does the publisher have to meet, to be able to make sure that the contract is fair, so that you have the expectations. If it's a contract on a prospectus, like when do you have to have the manuscript to them? What deadlines are there for you and for the publisher to get edits, rewrites, those kinds of things completed? Those are the top level ones. Anymore, I would say also look for things around AI. Are you allowed to use it or not allowed to use it? Is the editor allowed to, or the publisher allowed to use it or not use it? Those kinds of specific things should be spelled out in the contract as well. Those are kind of the big ones. A basic contract is going to cover a wider range of things as well. What territories is the contract for? Is it just the US? Is it for a different country only? Is it worldwide English rights? Those kinds of different topics, because that can really limit, if you try and get foreign translation rights, where you can do that at. So there's, I'm sure, probably others that the others have brought up as well. So
Adria?
So I'll take the tack for I think the generative AI is probably really key, especially right now. But like rights reversion is a thing that I have had some experience with, where the contracts I had maybe didn't have proper rights reversions. And so you need to make sure that rights reversion, a really explicit like rights reversion, if they don't publish your book or short story, when do you get those rights back so that you can send it out to other people? How does that look? And it needs to be like explicit timelines and that sort of thing. Along with like what happens if something should happen to the editor or publisher as a rights reversion. And I this year that's come up in several short fiction and in small press markets, where something has happened to the person who's in charge, and then all the authors are left without necessarily a proper rights reversion because, again, as AJ said, that we're family and so we don't need all this. And then it's as long as everyone involved wants to be on the up and up, it's never a problem. But sometimes even being on the up and up, the idea of what should happen doesn't match. And then it becomes, instead of a friendly discussion, it gets a little bit unfriendly, I guess would be the word, and it turns what could be a wonderful relationship very sour. So I always am very keen on looking at, as I said, the rights, what rights are being asked for, but also how and when do those return should something happen. Obviously we don't want anything to happen, but it happens.
And Solar.
Yes. So first, just to echo everybody here, generative AI clause is so important. And I think it's a red flag itself if the publisher or an editor doesn't express the willingness to even discuss it. So that's definitely something to look out for. With an editor, obviously they in the contract there is a really nice heading that you can always look for, which is the scope of rights, which is the first thing that you should always look at. You need to kind of see like which formats your book is published in, and also what territories that the editor or the publishing house would get. And definitely highlight the rights of reversion right clause. I think it was not something that I was aware of until I get to the book deal part of the contract. So that was very eye-opening, I would say. And definitely, like on the agent contract side, the key thing you should look out for is obviously like the commission structure that you would have with the agent. Is it a standard for domestic versus like international or foreign rights? And one thing that I also highlight to like other people and that I use to compare my offers is actually the termination clause. The termination clause basically tell you how things would go if you and your agent break up. And it's more important than you realize, because there are clauses that bound you and that agent for a lot longer than you realize. When you stop working with a certain agent, it doesn't mean that both of you are completely out, you're free, you're back to the query the next day. Sometimes the termination clause would bind you for, let's say, 30 days, sometimes 60, sometimes 90. That's something that you should try to negotiate. But definitely look into that, because that could determine a lot of like your timing as an author and how you and that agent would work together even after the relationship might have ended.
Okay. The question: what do you regularly see in a legit contract, and what you shouldn't see involved? Geoff?
In a legit contract, it's going to be it's going to have all the basic contractual language to it, in terms of it's going to spell out the expectations and rights for you as the author. It's going to spell out the expectations for the publisher or editor or agent, whoever it might be. It's a legit contract's going to be very cleared up front, and it should say things in a way that you can understand it. Doesn't mean that it's not going to use legal language, but you should be able to be free to ask for clarifications to make sure that you understand what each of the sections are talking about. Things that you shouldn't see in a contract, you shouldn't be seeing things where you give up rights. I feel that there shouldn't be exclusivity clauses in contracts, like you're exclusive to a publisher for a period of time or for a period of books. They might have a contract where it's a multi-book contract, but that's a little bit different. But you should have the right to go to other people, in terms of where to go for future work that you might be working on. The contract shouldn't spell out things like They have first rights to everything you produce. Some contracts might limit you to say this is for a novel length work, so you would be free to go pitch or sell novella length works to somebody else, right? Those are things that you want to try and look for. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not legit. It's just things to look for in the contract. That's kind of thing. I've not come across a lot of illegitimate contracts. I hope nobody ever considers mine to be that way. So, but those are the kinds of things that I like to see in a legit contract is how well it spells things out, that it's clear and understandable, and you're not, being painted into a corner for where your rights are begin and end. So,
Solar?
Yeah, I think it's I pretty much mentioned all of that in the other questions, but the agent commissions definitely one, termination clause definitely important, and also I'm blanking out on what words that would be, but the commission structure for when an agent use another agent. So if they have like a sub agents on other stuff, how would that be? That's also important. So as long as you have that clear out, if the language of the contract is very like clear and it's not trying to like trying to hide anything from like the legalese kind of language, I think that's something that you should see. What you should not see is definitely like the fee charged on you as an author, and I think some maybe like the life of the copyrights, how long that is tied to the agents that represents you at the moment.
All right, Adria?
So I will say that there are some associations that have example contracts for, say, short fiction. I'm not totally sure about longer works, other because I don't have as much experience in those. But those can be really helpful for knowing what you should see. So it's okay to have a very short contract for short fiction. You really want to see in that a expected publication date, if they're not going to publish on time, what happens, when do you get that story back, so that it's not sitting out there being held for years and you're like, well, I could have sent that somewhere else and gotten, moved along with my publishing career. Again, I think, as Solar said, like how long the rights are for, which in short fiction we do a lot of reprints. So when can I send this back out into like a reprint market? And those are usually 6 months to a year. There are some things like contests that sometimes hold on to the rights for like 5 years, which is very, very long. So things you really want to know, that sort of thing. So that really needs to be in the contract. And then again, payment. How much are they paying? So in short fiction, often you're paid by the word, or depending on the length, by the piece. So shorter lengths sometimes have just a flat fee. And then, when should you expect that payment? Within 30 days of the signed contract, within 30 days of publication. And how should you expect it? Is it going to be sent electronically or via check? Some people still send checks in the mail. I'm really big on the rights reversion. Gonna just say that every single question, I guess. I think too, this is, and I'm not sure if we're gonna get to this, but that there is a contract. So sometimes in short fiction, we will submit to non-paying markets just because we want our work out there. And that can be okay, but if you think they're going to publish something, especially if it's longer and you want, your goal is just for it to be read, like there should be, even if it's not like a really good contract, at least like an email chain that can be kind of held accountable, as AJ said before, about expectations of publication and the fact that it's a non-paying market. Like that, they should state that. You should know that up front, right, before you even sent your work to them. And this, of course, I don't think this applies at all to anything like novel length or longer. Those should always be in sort of a royalty contract or an advanced royalty contract. But in short fiction, Non-paying markets are not uncommon, and so but they will feel like they don't need a contract because they're not paying you. But I think it all needs to be stated in some way. And on their website's not going to be good enough because that can change. They could just change that, and then you're like, "But I was going by what you said on your website as a contract." That's not, so you need to have something that's like the biggest thing I think is that there is something that is contract like, some agreement back and forth. But they don't have to be long contracts in short fiction. They just really need to give you the highlights of publication timeline expectation, payment expectation, and rights. And of course, you should always keep all your rights, like you hold the copyright as the author. It's just what you're signing away is a right of publication, so they get to distribute it.
All right, and AJ.
So all of this is really great. And Adria, you just like embodied my charity anthology experience. It's an email chain and a small, really short like thing that has those basic ideas in it. But other than that, it's the email chain has the publication schedule and expectations and all of that. And so that is an experience that I am having at the moment because it doesn't publish until spring of 2027. So for me as a author working directly with publishers, what I look for is, are they willing to negotiate? Like, are they willing to work with me as the author? Are they willing to allow me to talk to other authors about their experiences and what they would have done differently or what they liked about their experience contract wise? If they're not willing to let you talk to other people or negotiate, there's likely something wrong with the contract, and you should probably get it vetted by whatever resource you have, whether it's a legal professional or the contracts committee at the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association or the Authors Guild. I think other guilds like the horror one and the mystery one and the romance one, like there's tons of guilds out there that are specific to genre, also have those resources. Of course, you have to be a member most of the time, but I do believe that the Authors Guild and SIFWA have like examples available to the public on their website. Um, but at least, at the very least, you need to get someone like Solar to who has experience with contracts. Like if you're getting an agent, talk to someone like her. Sorry if I got your pronouns wrong. Um, um, as somebody like Solar who has seen lots of contracts before. At the very, very least, that's what you need to do. And you and if your publisher balks at that idea, then the contract isn't going to be a good one. And it's possible they're not like legit, like, right? Because you want your publisher to work with you and to communicate with you and to help you understand what you don't understand.
All right, next question. Which clauses in a contract can you usually negotiate? AJ?
This is a big one. You should be able to negotiate every single clause in your contract, period, no matter whether it's an agent-author contract, an author-publisher contract, short story contract, anything. Like, it's all up for grabs. And that is not to say you should do that. There are going to be some clauses like how they deal with legal disputes that you're going to just want to make sure protect you and the publisher at the same time if you're doing the publisher and author contract thing. But one of the more flexible ones is going to be your royalty clause, right? They're going to probably like go back and forth with you if it's a publisher agent kind of thing. And I would also look at your delivery schedule, rights of refusal, like who gets your next books. Rights of refusal are really important because you don't want an exclusive rights of refusal, right? Because if they say no and they don't want you to publish with anybody else, that's bad. Um, Exclusivity in general is just not a great thing to have in any contract. Um, and you know, you want to look at your translation, movie, audio rights as well. Those are going to be a little bit probably more flexible than, say, your like legal defense and clauses and things like that.
All right. Adria?
So as AJ said, all of them. But not that you should. I would say that you know, I'm like a broken record today, where the ones that are super important are all about your rights and payment. Now, I will say that on short fiction, usually the payment is stated up front. It's 8 cents a word, 5 cents a word, 1 cent a word, or whatever denomination from the country of origin of the publisher. And you have already agreed to a word count because you submit a story and you say what your word count is, and they'll verify that, right? If you're like, I submitted a 10,000 word story and it's 5,000 words, right? You're not going to get the 10,000 words. So that's a very hard publication word count in the short fiction world. But just like you've already agreed to certain parts of your payment terms, but like knowing when you're going to be paid and the format of being paid, and some of them also have only limited capabilities for how they can pay again on the publisher side. So some only send checks, some only send PayPal, some have broader capabilities, and that'll be important. But that's almost like a pre-contract thing that you'll have to talk about if you can only accept certain formats in your country, and if you're like publishing across international boundaries. I think you could negotiate the generative AI clause. One, you should say, is there one there? And then two, ask for one if not, and then depending on what it says, you know, you might want to make sure that it definitely is covering you as well. And then in terms of rights reversions, sometimes, you know, they're very long and you might just want to shorten that up. So those would be the ones that I tend to look at and think that might need are most likely to potentially need some negotiation.
All right. Salah?
First of all, I just have to say, if there's one thing that we take away from this panel, is that we should be able to negotiate every clause on that contract. I love it so much. Because so like I said, I have an agent, and that agent is the main person that negotiate the contract between like on my behalf with the editor and the publishing house. So at that point, I was more in the mindset that I know that she's out there defending my rights, and I know that she's doing all that. So I think first of all, it's very important to have that trust in somebody who you know will negotiate, because I know there are agents that don't negotiate, and that itself should be a red flag. And then yeah, of course, I also think that you should be able to negotiate every contract clause, but you might not have to do that all the time. But I really liked, during my agent's offer time, I kind of like try to make their life a little bit harder by asking every questions that I have regarding like contract clauses. And it's just to help gauging how open they are in terms of like contract negotiation, and how much they know themselves on their agency contracts, because some of them are just like signing people without really have an idea of like how the agency contract looks. In terms of the agency contract itself, obviously, like I mentioned before, you need to know the termination notice period, the termination clause, how it looks. And I think this is specifically interesting and also important is the post-termination commission, because there will be a situation, for example, you're on sub currently and your agents have already put the work out there to other editors, but somewhere along the way you and that agent decided to part. How would the commission look? How, if you leave the agent, how long do they get the cut of the deals while in like mid negotiation, while you're together, and how the window looks like, how it would be if another agent come in, and etc. So it's also like a very interesting conversation in itself. And that's for the agent's contract. I think in terms of book contracts, AJ and Adria has already mentioned quite a few, and I love all those answers. Actually, I don't have much to put into that because, like I said, I didn't myself negotiate the contract, but I looked at it after it has already been negotiated. So one thing that you should always check is like the royalty scheme, and like advance and royalties, how that look when you would get paid. So for example, in a long form novel, you should be able to get paid after you like when you sign a contract, when you deliver like the first, it's called like the deliver and acceptance, like how long after the deliver and acceptance that you get paid. So that's also in the contract itself. And I think this is a little bit more relevant to during the like the pre-contract kind of talk, when your agent and the publishers are talking about like territory and subsidiary rights. So for example, I just wanted to wrap up that during, I think this should be already decided before the contract is drafted, but you should also clear out like what the territory or subsidiary rights look like. You can like for some agency, they sell world English, sometimes they sell world, or they only sell like North American, for example. So that's something that you should also keep in mind to negotiate.
And Geoff.
So the clauses that I consider that you can negotiate with a contract, simply put, all of them. A legitimate business is going to allow you to negotiate pretty much any aspect of the contract. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to acquiesce to your suggested changes or anything, but you should be able to talk to them about everything in it, no matter what part of the contract it is. There are a lot of things about, in contracts that deal with rights of succession, or if you need to negotiate, where those negotiations take place, or there's a lot of legal aspects of those things. Those are rarely, able to be negotiated too drastically. But certainly anything around your ability to do edits, your ability to get paid, how much you get paid, what is the rate for payment, rights to other versions or editions of the book, so audio rights, ebook rights, television media rights, those kinds of things, foreign language translations, all of those kinds of things should be negotiable within a contract. So,
okay. What are the signs that a contract can be trustworthy? Salah?
I think we have mentioned most of that before already. Like I think Adria said, it doesn't have to be long, but it has to be written, first of all. It can be in an email, that traceable email, so that both parties have a reference point. Preferably, it should be written in plain English, so that it doesn't like try to hide like predatory terms in like dense legalese. And a trustworthy contract should protect both parties. It should not like it should not give up one party for another, even though that as an author, sometimes you would think, oh, the contract is written for me and it protects me. But if it doesn't protect the publishing house itself, that should not be very trustworthy in my opinions. Like it should protect both parties.
Geoff?
I think that a trustworthy contract is one, it's going to be The publisher is going to allow you to, one, review it, and they're not going to be concerned if you review it with legal counsel, somebody who's familiar with contract law, somebody who's especially familiar with publishing rights and publishing contracts. There are plenty of people out there who kind of specialize in that kind of work. Those are things that make it trustworthy to begin with. The fact that a publisher is willing to negotiate on certain things should also point at least to a level of trustworthiness. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to negotiate in bad faith, but generally, if they're willing to negotiate, they're going to give you, they're going to have a little bit higher level of trustworthiness about it in the contract. So,
Adria?
Well, now I'm going to be the one to say I don't really have much to add to that. I think Solar and Geoff both covered a good amount of the things that would make a contract trustworthy. But I still think you should always read them and make sure that it does abide. So trustworthy doesn't mean still I don't need to negotiate anything. Often you don't, especially in the short fiction world, but there might still be things that you need to have negotiated because of your personal circumstances. That doesn't make the contract not trustworthy, just that you need to do that. But yes, otherwise I think for terms of what makes it a trustworthy contract, I don't really have much more to add.
And AJ?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add either, because for me, other than what Salar and Geoff and Adria have said, it's a big vibe check. Like, is the publisher willing to work with you? Are they willing to explain things to you and answer questions? They aren't against you taking it to a legal professional or another resource to vet for standard language that protects everyone involved, and protects the work as well. So yeah, that's how I always know that I'm going to be working with a trustworthy source, is that they are happy to answer questions. They're happy to let me take the contract for a couple of weeks and take a look at it. They will allow me to talk to authors that have worked with them in the past. Things like that. Big vibe check for me.
What are some resources that could give us an example of what a trustworthy contract look like? I know, AJ, you start to mention some of them.
Yeah, the Authors Guild and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association have contract and clause examples for a lot of different things, from short stories to agency author contracts to small publisher contracts to big publisher contracts. They have they just and SIFLA, especially if you're a member, I think you have access to all of that, a big database. There's also Writer Beware. They also go over certain parts of contracts like net versus gross and AI, as well as current scams in the industry that you should look out for contracts and things like that. Authors Guild is amazing. I do believe the Horror Writers Association has something, as well as I think Idaho has a writing guild, and they have resources for people looking for contracts, and especially for short stories and things like that. But so your local guilds are going to have resources for you as well. I would just do a lot of research about who you want to join, how to join them, and what resources they offer you.
All right, Adria?
I think AJ covered most of them. Another association that I can think of is SCBWI. It's the Children's Writers Association. I do write YA, and so that's an association, and they have a lot of resources as well. I'm not totally sure if they have full contract resources, but they have local groups, and again, that should provide a place that you can go to vet and learn about more contracts.
Okay, Salah?
I think that AJ has covered a lot of the main associations that I usually use as well. So definitely, just wanted to add to that. I think on the agent side, definitely check the Association of American Literary Agents, the ALA, and they might not have like an examples of agent author contract, but they should have something that like the canon of ethics, I think. So like the canon of ethics should bind should have a standard of like what they bind agents to do. So like if the contract kind of violate that ethics code somehow, that should also be a sign. So I think it can also be a really good source as well.
All right. And Geoff?
The resources I go to, the Authors Guild is a good resource. They provide templates for what are considered to be standards for contracts within the industry for authors. Other resources are out there. I believe other writers associations, such as the Mystery Writers of America, the Science Fiction Writers of America, so SIFWA and others, they have, if they don't have examples directly, if you're a member, you can ask for people to provide guidance on what should be in contracts and what is going to be fair to the author and what are the expectations between author and publisher. Those are the areas that you could start with. I mentioned earlier that there are contract lawyers that are out there for things, and there are plenty of lawyers that specifically work with publishing, and so are familiar with looking at publishing contracts and can give guidance in that area as well. The organizations, if you're a member of an organization, generally you're going to get that advice for free, or they're going to have it on their websites. If you look for a contract lawyer, you're probably going to have to pay them. So,
all right. What are red flags to watch for outside of the contract? Geoff?
Red flags outside of the contract. So the contract itself is probably may or may not have red flags that you want to look for. Red flags to watch out for outside of the contract: openness of the agent that you're working with, whether it's an agent, an editor, the publisher themselves, willingness that just of communication, right? Are they willing to communicate? Do they communicate in a timely fashion or not? Do you have to constantly bug them to get information, or are they fairly open and respond quickly? Generally, if they take a long time to respond, that could be a red flag, because if it takes a long time to respond about issues of the contract, what's it going to be like once you sign the contract and are working with them and you have questions about edits or the process or things like that? Those are potential issues around communication that could be a red flag in general. Are they open? Are they willing to allow you to talk to others that they have worked with, whether it's other authors, as an agent or as a publisher? If they're closed and they don't want you to, contact others, that could be a potential red flag, because that gets to the openness. How open is this person that you're going to be working with, this company that you're going to be working with, to get information, right? Being able to compare notes with others that they have worked with is always something that a publisher or an agent or an editor should be willing to do. And if they're reluctant to do that, I would consider that to be a red flag.
All right. Adria?
Again, in like short fiction, the length isn't like a huge deal, and the terms of the contract. Like you could have, I've signed 1-page contracts before, but they covered the important things like publication timeline, editing timeline, which I think I forgot to mention beforehand, editing clause 2. One thing that can happen sometimes in short fiction is they say, well, we can edit at any point, and you really don't want it to be edited out without you giving a final say on the edits. So that's another thing that I would say is a red flag, is if they just say, hey, we can edit anything, anytime, and put it out there, right, without your the author's permission first. Which I want to say, I was talking to some journalists and they say that's actually like very common in their industry, that editors can just edit and then the piece goes up and you're like, oh, which part was mine? Which part was the editor's? So do note that industry to industry, sometimes what is common is not. And so this is another case of where some things will come to the short fiction world from, say, novel publications or other media that is sort of normal in that media, but it's like a weird red flag in short fiction. So if you are coming from a different type of media into long form versus short form, or audio video versus written, note that sometimes the contracts change in ways where the red flag things that are perfectly fine in one format are a total red flag in another format. So, like, again, money should always flow towards the author. We should not be paying money to get our stories out there in most of the ways I work on. So in my short fiction, and even when I've done small press novel submissions or agent submissions, queries, I don't pay to do that. Though in some worlds, you do pay a reading fee for short fiction, depending on like some of the literary places like that used to get like college funding that can't get that anymore, now charging reading fees, stuff like that. And certain industries like SIFWA will say that that's not okay and that should not happen, and they will tell you don't do that. So at a certain point too, you have to figure out what is normal and common, and what's truly red flag, and what are you going to fight for anyway, in terms of your things, like and also I would say for me, anything that like allows generative AI would be a red flag. So I don't want that in my work, and I don't want my work published by people who think that's totally okay to do. So that, that's another case where what's common red flag and what's a red flag for you might be different. Lack of any sort of rights reversion, obviously a huge red flag. An unwillingness to put a contract out would be a red flag. I think AJ and Solar and Geoff have also covered other things that they haven't necessarily said red flag, but they would be. So I'm not sure. And everyone else gets to speak after me. So I'm sure I'm just going to be like, oh, yes, that too. So I'll let everyone else put in some insights.
Thank you. Well, to continue off, AJ?
So again, looking for things outside of the contract itself, like their attitude towards you, their attitude towards giving you the contract to look at or to vet ahead of time, asking to talk to other authors. If a publisher doesn't give you those kind of options or the ability to do that, they hedge around certain things. Those are generally red flags for me. And everything Adria said as well.
All right. Salah?
Yeah, I think it's also, I just wanted to echo AJ by saying a lot of the red flags that I'm seeing, especially in like an agent author relationship, for example, always happen outside of the contract, because that's something that the contract cannot kind of protect you from. So, for example, communication issues are how the attitude towards you, and a lot of the I used to call them yellow flags are sometimes like also worse than a red flag, because with a red flag, if somebody violates a contract, I would just leave. But with a yellow flag, you are a little bit hesitant in the sense that, okay, maybe this is not exactly wrong. Should I stay? Should I continue? And sometimes it can be really detrimental to your career. So the attitude is a huge problem. For example, like something that you cannot govern by a contract. But that's something maybe worth researching by looking them up on like Writer Beware, for example. Very useful website. Uh, I hate to say it, but scout Reddit. Reddit have the history of the internet saved in there. And I also hated this, but Twitter used to be a good place to scout or like to trace back bad behaviors. But now because there's a mass exodus on Twitter, we kind of lose that part of the history because a lot of people revamp themselves after they have already got off Twitter. So that's a sad thing, but I mean, it's Twitter. It's going always to be bad. But I would say that it's a red flag itself if you have no track records. It's not just that you're not like on the internet, but it's more on the agent side that if they had not made any sales, they have not like put on anything in publisher marketplace, so you don't know really knows their ability to like sell. Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of my concluding idea. It's like their ability to sell. If they even if they have like no track records of like being a bad agent, but on their like ability to sell your book, it's also might not be like a good sign if they are completely offline, if they had not made any sales.
Right, last question. What are common questions you ask the agent or publisher before signing? Geoff?
Common question. So I've not asked a lot of agents or publishers myself because I am one, but I've been asked a lot, generally questions around the things that we kind of discussed earlier. What areas of the contract are negotiable? Can we make changes to the different aspects of the contract, whether that's around advances or royalties, rights of which parts of the rights do you retain or not for the book, the manuscript, or whatever it is. Those are some things that you could ask them. There's others that might be out there, and I think the others have brought up can bring up some good other questions as well. But that, in my experience, it's generally any kind of question that you have, feel free to ask it to the publisher or the agent. They should be willing to answer anything that you ask of them, or at least find out what the answer should be. So,
Solar?
Yeah, also from an agent also contract kind of point of view, I definitely wanted to ask like outside of contract is there's also like editorial visions, what's their sub strategy. That's also important because usually the sub strategy is not included anywhere in the contract, so it's maybe good to know before you begin the relationship with them. And as I mentioned before, communication is a huge thing for me, so definitely ask that. And with in terms of contract itself, maybe important to also ask if the contract cover your entire length as an author, because it shouldn't be, I think, but I'm seeing more contracts that only cover one book and not the whole career. So that's something that is a little bit odd to me, but that's definitely something that you should ask an agent before signing with them.
All right. AJ?
Okay, so like Geoff had a lot of really good stuff to say. For me, looking at the boilerplate contract is like the most important thing to do before you sign, and being able to vet it through other agencies or a legal professional or someone who has seen lots of contracts before. That is also a good common question to be able to ask, can I do this? If they say no, run away. Ask about the publishing schedule, how they handle covers and production, and audio. Ask about rights reversion. Ask about rights of refusal. And a good publisher will let you ask anything, right? A good publisher will and a good partner will let you and answer your questions so that you understand, whether it's about the contract or about other things that the contract may not cover. Like Solar was saying, certain things aren't covered in author agent contracts, like editorial vision. You can ask your publisher the same questions because they're going to have a developmental edit stage if they're a good publisher, and they're going to have some sort of editorial vision for that as well. So ask everything. If it's on your mind, ask it. And if they don't answer, that's a big red flag.
And Adria.
So in short fiction, a lot of the things that you're going to need to know about should actually be like upfront on a website. So pay rate, publication timeline, plan in general. Some of the publications are further behind than others, but a lot of them nowadays will be like, okay, this is our reading period, submission period for the March issue or what have you. So you should at least have an idea of when your story is going to be coming out, and like I said, that should be in the contract too. But upon your acceptance email, you could just ask what's the timeline on this, and they might say that's in the contract. Just give us a minute, and then okay. Then there should also be things about sometimes generative AI is on the website, but you can always just ask too. Some places haven't gotten around to adding it to their contracts, although by this point, most who want to have. But you can always ask. I would say that there's really, in short fiction, nothing you can't ask. Editors are really busy, so constantly asking, are you going to publish me, is maybe not the most helpful. But you can always ask questions. I've always felt like I could ask my publications any questions, my publishers any questions as I went through it. And if you are getting a vibe, like AJ said, that your questions are unwanted or they just don't want to answer, that's a red flag. Now, keeping in mind that people are busy, so just their timeline might not be your timeline for response, but that you do get a response and you don't get a lot of terseness. And I would say also, even though it's short fiction, editorial vision is important as well. So sometimes I've had stories accepted, no revisions whatsoever. So of course that's wonderful. I would just write perfect stories, I guess. But other times I've had stories that needed a rewrite, or I had a situation where I had a story that was actually rejected, and they asked me, what did the ending mean? Or they wanted clarification on something. So I emailed back and answered, and they said, well, actually, if you would just make that more clear in the story and resubmit, then we'd probably publish it. So like a discussion with people lead to more publications. And right, if I had been like ignoring the question they asked me in the email about the ending, then I wouldn't have ever ended up with that publication. But I did. So I would say there's not a lot that you can't ask. It's in short fiction, but things that you might want to ask about would be editorial vision and timelines upon, say, an acceptance, if that's not given up straight up. I will say that usually what you get in short fiction is an acceptance email that says, we want to publish this. Is it still available? Especially if they take simultaneous submissions, which is that you've submitted your work to multiple places at the same time. I think in other longer work that is less common, though. I did have on one novel multiple offers of publication, but I didn't accept one before the other came in. So that that has a whole different process where you let people know so that they can make an offer if they want to. Whereas on short fiction, you can do that, but usually people will be like, well, congrats on your other publication. We look forward to reading it there, just because there's so much good short fiction out there that they have enough that they might be sad to lose out on your story, for sure, but they also know that it's going to a good place, hopefully. So it's not as likely to happen as like in a longer work, but yeah, I would say upon the acceptance, those are things you could ask about pre-contract. And a lot of them will send you a contract template. You could ask for a contract template, as AJ, I think, has said before, and get one of those. And then it'll be edited. But some of them are also so fast with the contracts that like the contract template's not worth getting because you might as well just get your contract. So I think that about sums up the things I would think about in short fiction.
All right. So now we will give each panelist a moment to give a last bit of advice to our viewer, or to plug anything they want to plug, starting with Adria.
So I would just say make sure that you have a contract of some sort, right? That it's either something that you both sign in some way, or that it's at least in an email chain that is traceable and usable by both parties should something happen. Yeah, and then just don't be afraid to ask questions, because frankly, editors generally want to make successful publications, and being open and communicative with their authors is a way to do that.
Thank you. AJ?
So my last advice is to ask questions, right? If you have good communication, you'll get that vibe whether or not this is going to be a good contract. And then you can like look at that boilerplate contract, right? Make sure you're vetting the contract through good resources like SIFA, Authors Guild, any other guild, a legal professional, someone who knows contracts. And just like have fun with it. It might be a job, but it's also a fun job to have.
And do you want to plug anything?
Oh, do I want to plug anything? Oh,
Yes,
I want to plug a lot of things. I have a trilogy out with Aethon Books and Blackstone Audio on Amazon. It starts with over here, Erebus Dawning. I have a new book coming out with Inked Gray in the spring of 2027. And that is called Aria Unsung. And I don't have an exact publication date for that yet. And I also have a charity anthology, which one of my very first flash fiction publication is coming out in. And that comes out in the spring of 2027 as well with Wild Ink Press. And the anthology is called Perigean Tide.
Thank you. Geoff?
My last bit of advice is don't be afraid to ask any question of an agent or a publisher or an editor. Anybody that you are working with, this is the contracts that are there are meant to protect all parties. So it's best for you to understand what it means. And the only way that you might that you can really understand it is if you don't know something, ask somebody, whether it is of the editor, the agent, the publisher that you're trying to work with, or a third party. Somebody else that you know who has signed contracts in the past, somebody who is willing to give you legal advice. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid to ask them. And if you're still confused, ask again. That's my best piece of advice. Always ask so you understand it, because the goal here is to make sure that all parties understand their responsibilities, the expectations, and how to meet them. And that's what the contract is for. And it's best if everybody understands where they stand. So that would be my advice.
And do you want to plug anything? Or?
Just if you're interested in what we do as Artemisia Publishing, you can reach out to us. We have our website. It's apbooks.net. That's apbooks.net. Has all of our titles that we publish. So if you're ever interested in trying to submit to us for consideration, feel free. You will notice on Duotrope or on our website, we are closed to unsolicited submissions. But if you mentioned that you were a part of the Write Hive event and let us know that, we'll take a look at it. So.
Last but not least, Solo.
That cut you off in the middle of the speech there. Can you repeat what the question was?
Last bit of advice, and if you want to plug anything.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my last piece of advice is to reach out to your community. There are so many authors in the same, may not be like exact same situation as you are, but they might know something that you don't. As AJ and Adria also mentioned before, like ask questions. And if you are a little bit hesitant to ask the questions directly to the publishers, it's also good to ask your author friends. They might have already been in that situation. They might have worked with that publisher before. So that might be a good start, right? And maybe they have already seen different types of contracts that they might be able to help you. So use your community and reach out to them for sure. A last bit about me and my debut novel River Runs Red is a part of a duology, and it's coming out in summer 2027 with Harper Voyager. I am so excited for this entire journey, and there's a lot more that I will unveil towards closer to the publication day. But you can always find me on Instagram. I'm under Soul R Hoàng without the A.
All right. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you all for watching this video. If you like, the panelists will be in the chat to answer any question. And with that, happy rest of your day and happy Write Hive.